I have the pleasure of introducing our next guest speaker, Ellen Gaus, who will be discussing an overview of the region's economic development and employment. After graduating from Duquesne University in December 2014, Ellen began an extended internship with the Urban Redevelopment Authority of Pittsburgh, where she conducted research for special projects such as the Next 3 Days program, the 2015 URA Tax Increment Financing Report, and the Innovation Roadmap website. Ellen accepted a market research analyst position with the Allegheny Conference on Community Development in 2016 and has been promoted to manager since. Ellen analyzes strategic areas of regional interest regarding business investment and regional vitality, and produces numerous products supporting the affiliates of the conference, which have included COVID-19 data summaries, economic impact reports, quarterly vitals, and more. Outside of work, Ellen enjoys volunteering with numerous organizations in the Pittsburgh area, all in an effort to better the environment and community she lives in. As you can tell, Ellen diligently seeks the good of Pittsburgh and the region, as do many of us, GYF, and guests here today. Please join me in welcoming Ellen Gaus.
Thank you all for having me here today. I think I'm good with the mic. My name is Ellen Gaus. I'm Market Research Manager at the Allegheny Conference on Community Development. I'm going to be giving a presentation on what's happening in the southwestern Pennsylvania region. So to start, I wanted to do a little summary of the financial specialists occupation in our southwestern Pennsylvania region. So there are about 24,000 jobs in 2022, which is nearly 20% of the state's financial specialists, meaning about 20% of the state's employment in financial specialists is here in our region. Average annual earnings that is 20% above the regional average earnings, and we are at 94% recovery from 2019 in the region compared to 109% nationally. So not quite at the same pace, but close. And 29% annual turnover rate compared to 40% nationally. These slides are available on the website and they could be sent otherwise if you want to look at more tables further for additional information. The table below looks at the employment of particular occupations as well as the recovery from 2019 and how that industry staffing pattern relies on those occupations. So I'm going to go through a couple different topics of what's happening in the region, starting first with a demographic update. Southwestern Pennsylvania has been dealing with population decline since the early 1970s. You can see a dramatic dip in the 80s, of course, with the decline of the steel industry, with a slight bump in the 1990s. You're welcome. You do see another revision in the late 2020s, where you can sort of see the dashed line there. From this trend line, you can see a peak in the early 1980s when up to 50,000 people were leaving the region annually. And population estimates are projected to continue this loss through the coming decades. There is the Center for Rural Studies, which I believe is supported by the Penn State University, that has projections through 2050. So what's driving population change is several components of change, which includes natural change, international migration, and domestic migration. I know that these are not necessarily the easiest to see between the two slides here, but yellow represents natural change, red is international migration, and gray is domestic migration. So international migration was a bright spot for the region, but it has trailed off. Domestic migration varies. The last time that it was positive was in the early to middle of the last decade, when the regional economy was performing better than the nation due to Marcellus shale activity. But the improving economy nationwide began to draw people out of the region. Our biggest challenge is natural population loss, meaning that deaths exceed births. Looking at this chart, we see deaths and births compared directly. This is a lingering legacy of the early 1980s when baby boomers were disproportionately leaving the region and taking their families with them. Natural population change slipped into the negative territory in the mid-1990s. While deaths have remained relatively steady, births have also dropped. And Pittsburgh has been the only major region for many years where the population is aging at a greater rate, more population loss due to deaths, but other regions are beginning to experience this loss as well. As I mentioned, we're not the only ones experiencing these challenges, but the pandemic gave Pittsburgh company. So in the next couple of slides, I'm going to be comparing a couple different groups of metropolitan areas where we segment them into aspirational, competitive, and peer regions. Aspirational regions are the regions that we can aspire to be like, such as Austin, Boston, Denver, Seattle, and Minneapolis. Our competitive markets are the ones we find ourselves frequently competing with, which is Baltimore, Charlotte, Nashville, Indianapolis, and Philadelphia. And then our peer markets are the ones that we are most like, so Cleveland, Cincinnati, Detroit, St. Louis, and Milwaukee. So looking at the change in population by metropolitan area between April 1st, 2020 and July 1st, 2022, you can see that our competitive and aspirational markets, including Austin, Charlotte, Nashville, grew quite substantially, whereas Pittsburgh actually declined 0.9%, but we are among our peer benchmarks as well as Boston, a competitive market. But the core city is actually doing better than the region itself. So this slide is looking at the principal city of those regions, so thinking of the Pittsburgh MSA, but looking at the city of Pittsburgh specifically. So the core city percentage change in the population from that same time period, April 1st, 2020 to July 1st, 2022. Cincinnati and Pittsburgh were the only cities where the growth was neutral or therefore flat, where a few cities did exceed and they grew, whereas others declined. Here, looking at the region compared to the cities, we know that Cincinnati and Pittsburgh experienced no growth, they were flat, but there were only two benchmark regions where the city outperformed the region, that being Seattle and Pittsburgh. So the order has changed in this slide because, as you can see with Austin, Charlotte, Nashville, and Indianapolis, the metro grew quite substantially. The city did not grow as substantially or actually declined, but the region outperformed the metro. I'm sorry, that the metro outperformed the core city. Looking within our region, the Allegheny Conference focuses on the 10-county region, which includes the now 8-county metropolitan statistical area, but the 10-county region for us also includes Greene County and Lawrence County. So this chart looks at the southwestern Pennsylvania region as a whole, and then each of the respective counties individually. The gray column looks at the percentage change from 2010 to 2020, and the red is 2020 to 2022. So Butler and Washington counties are the only counties to consistently show population growth, whether that is in the long-term trend of 2010 to 2020, as well as the short-term from 2020 to 2022. But these dynamics vary by county. So this looks at the annual rate of change per 1,000 residents, again from 2020 to 2022. It's interesting that counties like Armstrong, Indiana, and Westmoreland have experienced positive net migration since April 2020, which could indicate that people are moving further out in an age of hybrid work. But all counties are seeing natural loss, but in Greene and Allegheny County, migration has been a greater contributor. So this once again looks at the gray bar being total change, red being natural change, whether that is a combination of births and deaths, and then yellow being the net migration of the two. I'm sorry, not of the two, but rather what is happening in that county. I know this map is a little busy to look at, but this is looking at the municipalities of individually and where change is happening and what that change is. And particularly looking at this in a mapped aspect, you can see that a lot of the growth is happening along the I-79 corridor, and higher growth is happening in areas like Cranberry, Washington, or Canonsburg area. And while more of the rural counties from Fayette and Greene are experiencing more loss. I don't think it'll be a surprise to many here that the southwestern Pennsylvania region is an older region, and comparing southwestern Pennsylvania to Pennsylvania and as well as the United States, you can see that the southwestern Pennsylvania region is not too far off from where the state is in terms of our population composition in terms of age, but we are significantly older compared to the United States. I have a call out on the population that is 55 and older, where I think you can see the most dramatic change between the region compared to the United States. By the same token, even though we have a larger share of our population that is 55 and older, the older population is not growing as quickly as our other age segments. So particularly with 55 and older, you'll see that the southwestern Pennsylvania region is growing at a rate of 1.8% comparing 2010 to 2022. And that rate is exceeded by Pennsylvania and the United States at 8.9% and 15.4% respectively. And you can see that trend continue with the 65 to 74 age group as well as the 75 and over age group. The 25 to 34 age group is growing at the same rate as the nation, with slight growth in 35 to 44 as well. You'll see 25 to 34 in the middle at 10.7% for the region, 11.3% for the state, and 10.8% for the nation. Looking at the median age by year by geography, we can see that the region is aging at a slower rate than the nation. So while the region is, the region is aging at less than half the rate of the nation, in the last column, looking at the change from 2010, we can see that the United States has aged 1.7 years in that time period, whereas southwestern Pennsylvania has aged 0.7 years. Particularly, Allegheny County has actually declined in its median age by 0.7 years. So the line chart can show how that trend has gone from 1980 up to 2022. And we see particularly for Allegheny County, that change happened between 2010 and 2020, where Allegheny County now ranks third when comparing the United States, Pennsylvania, and Southwest Pennsylvania. The median age for the United States in 2022 being 38.9. Southwestern Pennsylvania is a less diverse region compared to the state, the nation as well. Again, in the middle, we have southwestern Pennsylvania, and then a call out for Allegheny County and the remaining counties. Again, we at the Allegheny Conference focus on a 10-county region. So those other counties include Armstrong, Beaver, Butler, Greene, Indiana, Lawrence, Washington, and Westmoreland counties. You can see that southwestern Pennsylvania has a less diverse population compared to Allegheny County. And when you compare southwestern Pennsylvania, Allegheny County, and the remaining counties, you can see the influence that the remaining counties have on southwestern Pennsylvania region. And you can particularly see with the United States, the significantly larger share of the population that identifies as Hispanic and Latino, as well as the Black population and others, which include Asian, American Indian, Native, Alaska Native, and Pacific Islander, and those that identify as 2 or more races. Again, the call out there, which groups the diverse populations and calls them out in contrast to the white population, showing the difference between the white population and the non-white population. But that diverse population is an important sector for growth, particularly for the United States and for our region as well. That the region from this slide is looking at southwestern Pennsylvania, and the United States by those different racial demographics. And the region is diversifying faster than the nation, but is still trailing. And this is important because the white population nationwide is projected to decrease in the coming decades, outpaced by those diverse populations. One of the most dramatic points is, again, with the Hispanic and Latino identifying population, which is ethnicity compared to race. So Hispanic or Latino identifying within any race. And between 2010 and 2022, in our region of southwestern Pennsylvania, this population has grown 66.3% compared to 26.1% in the nation. You compare that to the white population, which has declined 3.8% in the region compared to a 0.6 decline nationally. And the furthest left column is the sum total of all the columns to follow. So while the region has declined 0.5%, you compare that to 7.9% growth nationally, and then take that with the additional demographic characteristics to see these ones are declining, these ones are growing. White population declining 3.8%, Asian population has grown 59.5%, two or more races 51.9%, Hispanic Latino 66.3%. But it's, I think, very interesting and very important to compare those different components of racial change. And now I'm going to transition into looking at an employment update for our region. So looking at a long-term trend from January of 2018 to May of 2023, month by month, employment growth has been above historic levels since 2021. You can obviously see from March 2020 through May 2021, a huge decline and increase as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. But in June 2023, only 45,000 people are unemployed in the region, which is the smallest on record. Again, I know this chart might be hard to read in its entirety, but the year-over-year rate of employment change, again, comparing month over month from January 2018 to June 2023, in June 2023, the Pittsburgh region had a 2.4% year-over-year employment change compared to 2.7% for the United States and 2.9% for our benchmark regions. In addition, unemployment is also at historic lows. We're looking again at month over month from January 2020 to June of 2023. And southwestern Pennsylvania has a 3.5% unemployment rate in June 2023, which is the lowest among the comparisons here to Pennsylvania and the United States. Pennsylvania being at 3.8% and the United States being at 3.6%. You can see that in the trend line, generally the southwestern Pennsylvania region is in the middle between the United States and Pennsylvania. So while not the greatest ranking, it's also not the worst. But our labor force is struggling to rebound, and looking at a labor force index where we put February 2020 as the baseline of that being an index of 100, that we are at 96 today versus 101 or 99 for the state and for the United States. This is greatly related to low population growth, which impacts the regional labor force ability to rebound. Obviously, with the pandemic, there was an exacerbation in the number of retirements, which happened regionally and nationally, and the region's older population compounding that. So we were disproportionately impacted by that event. I also want to mention that when it comes to labor force is looking at those that are currently working and those who are unemployed. So that being the sum total of people who are able to work. Wanted to make sure that that's easily segmented between employment and unemployment, but labor force means all of those that are able to work. However, employment growth is still solid. Here again, we're looking at our benchmark regions, and you can see blue for the aspirational markets, red for competitive, and gray for peer markets, and Pittsburgh ranks right in the middle at 2.9% employment change comparing June 2022 to June 2023, which exceeds the United States and the benchmark average. United States having grown 2.4% and the benchmark average being 2.7%. Pittsburgh being right in the middle. We're mostly among our peer and aspirational markets, but we do exceed several other peer and one other competitive market. However, employment has still not returned to pre-pandemic levels. So comparing June 2023 as a percentage of June 2019 to say, okay, from June 2019, where are we today? Are we at 90% of that level of employment? Are we at 100%? Have we exceeded 100%? Unfortunately, in this metric, Pittsburgh is lower in the ranking at 98.5%, whereas other metros, including Austin, Nashville, Charlotte, Indianapolis, Philadelphia, many others, have exceeded growth from June 2019. And again, with Pittsburgh ranking lower, this is below the benchmark average and the United States average, both of which were at, well, United States at 103.4% and the benchmark average being also 103.4%. As I mentioned previously about the relationship between employment growth and population growth, there's a strong correlation between the two. That when you compare population growth, which is on the left, I think the leftmost side, the left axis, or am I mixing up my left and my right? The right axis is population growth from 2010 to 2021, and the percentage of pre-COVID-19 employment on the left axis. So all of the triangles belong to the right, the bar chart belongs to the left. So particularly with Austin, you can see the highest percentage of pre-COVID-19 employment, as well as the highest population growth between 2010 and 2021, and down the line, where you can see the relationship demonstrated of population growth and employment recovery. But when it comes to employment, we have to look at the industries that compose our employment. So the growth rates vary by industry to say where is that growth occurring or where is more of a struggle occurring. So looking at the year-over-year change in employment by sector, this is a pretty standard order of the industries, and comparing the Pittsburgh MSA to the United States. In the middle, you can see the greatest growth occurring in transportation and warehousing in the Pittsburgh MSA compared to the United States, where the Pittsburgh MSA experienced 8.3% growth compared to the United States of 0.7% growth. But you also see that growth occurring particularly in educational services, leisure and hospitality, professional and business services, financial services. But for the United States, more of that growth occurred in mining and logging, government, leisure and hospitality as well, healthcare and social assistance. Particularly with mining and logging, you can see more challenges related to market forces, or emphasis on other types of employment or other types of resources, and healthcare experiencing greater labor shortages. So in comparison to the year-over-year change in employment by sector, looking at the percentage of employment in June 2023 compared to June 2019, you can see greater recovery in transportation and warehousing, again, in the middle of the chart. So in the Pittsburgh MSA, that is 107% recovery compared to 107.9% national recovery. But as I called out mining and logging, which is more to the left of the chart, you can see in the region, this is at 68.6% recovery compared to a national recovery of 87.6%. And for healthcare and social assistance at 94.1% for the Pittsburgh MSA compared to 104.8% for the United States. So again, here you see among the different industries, how able are they to recover where has the region exceeded the United States or vice versa? Looking at these industries again to see where has the shortfall occurred. This is looking at the absolute change in employment for the Pittsburgh MSA, so no geographical comparison here, but just which industries have grown, which ones have declined. The greatest increase has occurred in professional, scientific, and technical services, management of companies, arts, entertainment, recreation, transportation and warehousing again, information, social assistance, and educational services, while all the others have experienced an absolute decline in employment between June 2019 and June 2023. While you might see that there is more red than there is green, you can see the balance between professional, scientific, and technical services having grown nearly 8,000 jobs and hospitals declining in that same period of time. So that shortfall is concentrated to just a handful of industries. The last topic that I'm going to get into is an investment update. This primarily comes from the Business Investment Scorecard produced by the Allegheny Conference, where we are looking at investment and development activity in the region. And in this chart, we're looking at, again, those investment announcements and those development announcements. Investment announcements can be thought of as investments in jobs and in people, whereas development deals are regarding site preparation, buildings, a place where that economic activity may occur. So we see a larger proportion of these growth announcements are in investment deals compared to development deals, but that balance has been relatively stable, I would say, since about 2011, 2012, and relatively steady with a dip, yes, in 2020 and beyond, but maintaining the ratio between the two. Diving into the investment announcements in particular, and again, investment is more about jobs and the people as opposed to the sites and the buildings, you can see that more of the activity is happening in expansion and retention of companies compared to attractions or relocations or startups. However, that is an important amount of the investment announcements in general. But after a dip in 2019, in 2020, 2021, and 2022, you can still see that, again, the ratio is maintained where more of the activity is happening in expansion and retention, which for the Allegheny Conference means that there is more of an emphasis on companies that exist here and what they need to succeed compared to attracting companies here. While that still factors into our attraction strategy and overall business investment policy, we know that more of it's going to be about the companies that are already here. With those announcements, we are also looking at the job impact related to those announcements. So which jobs are new versus which jobs have been retained. So gray is the new jobs, yellow is the retained jobs. And over time, you've seen far more retained jobs, which has declined in recent years, but the amount of new jobs announced related to those investments has remained relatively steady. And in 2022, you can see that that is 4,205 new jobs and 1,438 retained jobs. The smallest year on record was 2020, unsurprising in that relationship. But in a couple of other slides, I'm going to talk about the investment dollars in year comparisons. So looking at 2016, 2017, and 2018, we can relate that to other announcements such as the Shell cracker plant and UPMC's announcements to invest in and build additional hospitals. So again, looking by year, how much money has been invested in those types of deals. Again, segmenting it by investment deals and development deals. 2016 looks pretty weird with so much money invested. And again, that is related to the Shell cracker plant with $6 billion alone being related to that project. 2017 and 2018, again, with more announcements from UPMC to build additional hospitals and invest there. But you see a slight shift from dollars going into investment deals, going into development deals. And all of these dollar amounts are in billions of dollars, which you can see on the left side of the chart. And I'll make a quick mention that, again, this is related to the Business Investment Scorecard put out by the Allegheny Conference. This looks at the most recent calendar year that has concluded. So this is looking at what happened in 2022. This information is being tracked for 2023, and you can expect a Business Investment Scorecard to come out in approximately June of 2024 to summarize activity in 2023. So this is not merely a retrospective look when it comes to the Business Investment Scorecard, but in terms of what we can say has already happened, this is a look back. In addition, we're looking at these growth announcements by the sector in which they occur. So of course we want to look at jobs, we want to look at dollars, we want to look at the physical location of these things, but also what exactly is happening. Is this in manufacturing, technology, robotics, healthcare, life sciences, financial and business services, and energy-related announcements? Energy-related announcements are a little bit of a special animal because they can be related to other industries, so it's a little bit of double counting because they are related to those other industries. Looking from 2007 up to 2022, you can see how these rankings have changed, where manufacturing has been relatively dominant since 2007, now ranking second in the growth announcements, whereas it dominated in 2007. But you look also at a trend in the energy-related announcements, spiking in 2010 and 2011, running into about the middle of the pack after that, and now comfortably in the second or third position from the bottom in 2022. But also seeing a sector such as our energy-related announcements gaining more prominence after 2017 and now ranking third overall. The dashed red line is our development announcements, which again is looking at investments in properties and sites. So we want to be ready for more of those announcements to happen, whatever sector they may occur in. So particularly comparing the pre-pandemic era to the pandemic era, looking at those announcements, this chart looks at 2015 to 2019, the average of that period, 2020, peak pandemic, 2021, and 2022. The left chart is looking at the share of investment announcements by key sector, and the right chart looks at the share of investment announcements by type of operation. With the type of operation, you can see a decline in the number of headquarters announced, in the number of branches announced, and the number of back offices, which is reflective of operations that can more easily translate to a hybrid environment, whereas there was a growth in distribution centers and plants where that work is essential in person of building things, picking things to distribute. And looking at the key sectors, again on the left-hand side, you can see a growth in manufacturing, relatively steady in healthcare life sciences, with a peak in 2020. However, there has been a drop-off in technology and robotics and financial and business services. Again, this might be reflected in those industries that can more easily translate to a hybrid type of operation versus an in-person necessary operation. Focusing particularly on distribution centers, we do, again, look at these investment announcements by the type of operation, so you can really see the acceleration of distribution centers happen over the years. This compares 2015 to 2022, and this trend is only expected to continue increasing. You can think of Amazon distribution centers, FedEx, or other retailers that have set up distribution centers in the region, as well as the activity at Pittsburgh International Airport to bring in more cargo and freight, and increasing service to other airlines. Another segment to focus on is our energy announcements. So you can see the number of energy-related announcements between investment and development deals on the left-hand side, as well as the percentage of energy-related announcements in investment and development on the right-hand side in terms of absolute percentages. So you can see that the annual average was much greater in the 2015 to 2019 period of time, It has dropped off in 2020, 2021, and 2022, but you can see the shift from traditional sources to renewable sources. Gray representing traditional and the yellow being renewable. So again, with the right-hand chart looking at the absolute change, you can see we've gone from an average of 14% renewable announcements between 2015 to 2019 to over 70% in 2022. And this can be related to solar farms, other renewable sources, battery manufacturing. So again, another industry that crosses over with many other sectors as well. To summarize all of the points that have been distilled here, you can see how the job growth, the job change is very much related to population. Faster growing regions can add jobs faster, can recover faster. But you have to ask, for our region and for other regions, what do you have first? Do you have the people to fulfill the jobs, or do you have the employers to bring the jobs and therefore bring the people? Slowing aging in the region brings hope that natural loss will decrease. So we know that we have an older population in the region compared to the United States or others. But again, the median age is decreasing. But we do see that other regions are experiencing the same challenges as we are. So we're not necessarily alone in that struggle, but it is still a challenge for us to face. Strong employment growth in the past 2 years will slow with additional slowing population growth or decline. And though employment continues to lag 2019 levels, pandemic impacts have largely been abated. But this is now more driven by those population factors, which unfortunately we have to keep contending. Mining and logging is always going to be challenged by those market forces of what resources are we using, what resources are we exhausting, what resources are generating interest. Construction is declining with the wind down of the Shell cracker plant project, as well as seasonal impacts. And healthcare and social assistance faces workforce shortages in terms of different factors that are specific to the employment of that industry, challenges for care of a older population, of a growing older population, as well as other pay factors. And the pandemic continues to impact business investment, as we saw from the development and investment announcements. We see more distribution centers in our region, manufacturing accounting for a higher percentage of investments, and business and financial services, branch offices, and other operations that are more easily translated to hybrid environments, taking up a lower share of those overall announcements. This concludes what I have to remark on for my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions and discussion. I'm also happy to talk about what the Allegheny Conference is doing about these different challenges that have been outlined here. But this has been a discussion of what's happening in our region. Again, my name is Ellen Gaus, Market Research Manager at the Allegheny Conference. Happy to talk further about what has been discussed here. And I also want to say, I think there is a microphone either in the back or that can be brought around to ask questions. So if you have something that you would like to ask, please raise your hand and we will get to your question. Yes?
I was stunned by the statistic that showed the employment in hospitals had decreased as much as it has in light of the prominence of the medical community in both AGH and UPMC building new facilities. Can you comment on that? Or do you want to repeat the question?
Yeah. So the question is about why employment in healthcare life sciences is decreasing when we see increased investments in the hospitals through AGH, UPMC, Highmark, and others. I think with healthcare, you see an industry that is balanced between a lot of high-paying positions, doctors, surgeons, and others, as well as a lot of low-paying positions through administrative functions, nursing, and others. I think the pandemic had a huge impact on this strain of that industry, the strain of those jobs, those individuals that were working in those places, both from a financial aspect as well as a personal well-being aspect, the challenge of caring for so many individuals that need dramatic care. But I think the downturn in that particular industry also indicates a shift to smarter work, perhaps more remote work for those that are staffing call centers and other types of operations for healthcare operations. But I think it's not exclusive to the region, that challenge, that it is a national trend. But certainly the healthcare industry is of significant importance to our region with those dominant employers. But they're not just healthcare employers. I mean, from insurance to the hospitals to other operations. And with an aging population, that cannot be ignored and it cannot go away. It will continue to be there, but in what form? It will be evolving over the next couple of years. Does that help answer the question?
Yep, thank you.
I know with a lot of the population discussion, it tends to be a depressing topic. So I will not shy away from discussing it or helping to understand or answer any of those questions. But again, any further questions or comments, I'd love to hear them. Yes, sir.
In terms of potential population growth, how much of the how much is our regional life expectancy compared to other areas? Is part of it that our life expectancy is shorter?
I see. The question is about life expectancy, to say if this factors into population growth or decline. That is a great question. That has not factored into the research that I have done. We discussed here the median age of the population, but not necessarily how long does that population expect to live. So again, frankly, good question. Don't have the answer for you on that, but it's a great aspect to consider. I do want to make mention that for the Allegheny Conference, we have on our website a strategic plan which looks at these challenges that we have discussed here. So particularly, and I want to make sure that I mention these strategies appropriately, that the Allegheny Conference has a 2023 work plan that focuses on growing our economy, galvanizing inclusive regional engagement, and unlocking our region's potential. So we want to have more business investment here, looking at a 3-year goal of $1 billion in capital investment, 10,000 more jobs, and 150 project wins, focusing on high growth, innovation-driven industries where our region has had a competitive advantage, including advanced manufacturing, energy, life sciences, robotics and AI, as well as the space economy, looking at astrobotic and others that are doing innovative things in the aerospace industry. Developing a business retention and expansion strategy, as we saw those announcements in our existing operations, comprising a larger share of overall announcements. Executing a foreign direct investment strategy in 1 to 3 international markets, and guiding the region's efforts to build and grow a diverse, globally competitive workforce. And the other strategies for galvanizing inclusive regional engagement and unlocking the region's potential look at a people-based approach as well as a policy-based approach of how do we make the region, how do we make Pennsylvania a competitive place to do business. This relates to the lowering of the corporate net income tax in Pennsylvania from one of the highest, if not the highest in the nation, to lower over a staggered phase down over the coming years. So the Allegheny Conference stands ready from a policy perspective, boots on the ground jobs perspective, and inclusive growth and equitable growth perspective to tackle these challenges. Are there any other questions? Industry perspective, jobs perspective, employment? Yes, sir.
Where do you see the foreign investment coming from?
Okay. The question is, where do we see the foreign investment coming from? Particularly at the Allegheny Conference, I have seen more focus on Germany and Canada recently. Our business investment team within the Pittsburgh Regional Alliance attends conferences nationally and internationally to talk about our relationships with companies both within the region and outside of the region that have relationships to foreign parent companies. The region particularly has a strong relationship also with Japan and the UK. If you look on our website, we do have quick cut sheets for some of our stronger foreign partners, but particularly with the foreign direct investment question, I would first think of Germany, Canada, and the UK. Historically, the region also has a stronger tie to Germany in terms of our local companies that have operations in Germany, as well as companies locally that are owned by German parents. So that's one of our stronger relationships.
Any final questions for Ellen? Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for your service to our community, and thanks for sharing your insights today.
Thank you.